Hello, my name is Carole, and I never thought I'd be sitting here telling you about the day I discovered my best friend was sleeping with my husband while I was going through the most difficult time of my life. But here we are, and trust me, this story has more twists than a mountain highway in Colorado. Picture this: you're in the middle of a messy divorce, your world is falling apart, and the one person you think you can trust, your closest friend since college, is actually stabbing you in the back in the worst possible way. That's exactly what happened to me 6 months ago in Denver, and what I did about it? Well, let's just say revenge is a dish best served with receipts and a whole lot of patience. Before we embark on this incredible journey together, I have a small, heartfelt favor to ask. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up. It costs you nothing but means the world to me. And let me know in the comments which beautiful corner of the world you're watching from. Your support truly makes all the difference. Now, I want to be clear from the start. I'm not proud of everything I did, but when someone you've known for 15 years, someone who was supposed to be your maid of honor, your confidant, your sister in everything but blood, decides to cozy up to your soon-to-be ex-husband behind your back, well, that changes a person. It certainly changed me. My name is Carole Matthews. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in downtown Denver, married to what I believed was a decent man named Derek, and best friends with a woman I'll call Madison, though believe me, that's not her real name. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding the knife. This isn't just a story about betrayal, though there's plenty of that. It's about discovering strength you never knew you had, about the difference between justice and revenge, and about how sometimes the truth really can set you free, even when it burns everything down in the process. So buckle up, because this ride gets bumpy fast. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a crisp October morning in Denver, and I was sitting in my lawyer's office on the 16th floor of a downtown high-rise, staring out at the Rocky Mountains while discussing custody arrangements for our golden retriever, Bailey. Yes, you heard that right. We were arguing over dog custody. That's what my marriage had become. Derek and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. We met at a CrossFit gym in Cherry Creek, of all places. He was this charming software engineer with kind eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. I thought I'd won the lottery. Looking back, I realized the red flags were there from the beginning. The way he'd check out other women when he thought I wasn't looking, how he'd get defensive when I asked about his late nights at the office, the mysterious phone calls he'd step outside to take. But Madison? Madison had been my rock through all of it. We'd been inseparable since our sophomore year at University of Colorado Boulder. She was the one who helped me pick out my wedding dress at that little boutique in Capitol Hill. She was the one who held my hair back when I had food poisoning on my honeymoon in Cabo. She was the one who brought me ice cream and wine when Derek and I had our first major fight about starting a family. Madison worked as a real estate agent for one of those high-end firms that sells million-dollar homes in Cherry Hills Village. She was beautiful in that effortless way. Long auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of smile that made both men and women stop and stare. She was also single, had been for about 2 years since her breakup with some investment banker who turned out to be married. "You deserve so much better than Derek," she'd tell me during our weekly coffee dates at Snooze on South Broadway. "He doesn't appreciate what he has." I thought she was being a supportive friend. I thought she genuinely cared about my happiness. The divorce proceedings had been dragging on for 3 months when I first noticed something was off. Madison started canceling our plans more frequently. First, it was a client emergency, totally understandable in real estate. Then it was family drama with her sister in Fort Collins. Then it was a stomach bug that lasted suspiciously long. When we did see each other, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone, cutting our conversations short. She'd ask fewer questions about how I was handling everything with Derek, and when I'd vent about his latest attempts to hide assets or his refusal to split the equity in our Highlands Ranch home fairly, she'd give these vague responses like, "mm-hmm," and "that sucks." I started to worry I was being too much, you know. Going through a divorce makes you paranoid about everything. including whether you're burdening your friends with your problems. So I pulled back a little, gave her some space. I figured she was probably just dealing with her own stuff. Meanwhile, Derek was being his usual difficult self. He'd moved into a corporate apartment in downtown Denver, claiming he needed space to find himself, whatever that meant. He was fighting me on every single detail of the settlement, from the house to our joint savings account to, yes, poor Bailey. His lawyer was this shark from one of those big firms on 17th Street, and Derek was clearly enjoying making my life as complicated as possible. But here's the thing that started eating at me. Derek seemed almost happy. Not relieved, not peaceful. Happy, like genuinely excited about his new life. For someone going through a contentious divorce, he was remarkably upbeat whenever we had to interact about paperwork or Bailey's schedule. Little did I know that his happiness had a name, and she had been sitting across from me at coffee shops for months, listening to me pour my heart out while she was planning her future with my husband. The first real crack in my oblivious little world came on a Thursday evening in November. I was having one of those days where everything felt impossible. My boss had dumped a last-minute campaign revision on my desk. My lawyer had called with news that Derek was now demanding half the value of my grandmother's antique jewelry, and Bailey had somehow gotten into the garbage and spread coffee grounds all over my kitchen floor. I needed my best friend. So I called Madison around 7 p.m., hoping we could grab dinner and maybe catch that new rom-com at the Cherry Creek Mall. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up, and when she did, her voice sounded different, breathless almost. "Hey, Carole, what's up?" she said, but there was something in the background, music, maybe voices. It sounded like she was at a restaurant or bar. "Are you out somewhere?" I asked. "I was hoping we could hang out, maybe grab some food. I've had the day from hell." There was this pause, just a few seconds, but long enough that I noticed. Actually, I'm at a client dinner. Big potential sale in Greenwood Village. You know how it is." I did know how it is. Madison had told me about these client dinners before. They were usually stuffy affairs at places like the Capitol Grill or Guard and Grace, where she'd spend hours schmoozing wealthy couples looking for their dream home. "No worries," I said, trying not to sound disappointed. "Rain check?" "Absolutely. I'll call you this weekend, okay? Love you." She hung up quickly, and I was left standing in my kitchen, Bailey looking up at me with those sympathetic golden retriever eyes that seemed to say, "I know, Mom. People suck sometimes." Here's where I made my first mistake. I decided to cheer myself up by going out anyway. There's this little wine bar called Postino in the Highlands neighborhood that I'd been wanting to try. They had good reviews and a cozy atmosphere, perfect for wallowing in my feelings with a glass of Pinot Grigio and some bruschetta. I threw on a sweater and jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove the 20 minutes from my place in Highlands Ranch to the trendy part of town. Postino was exactly what I'd hoped for. Dim lighting, exposed brick walls, the kind of place where you could disappear into a corner booth and pretend your life wasn't falling apart. I was 3 sips into my wine when I saw them. Madison and Derek, sitting at a high-top table near the back of the restaurant. Her hand was covering his across the table. They were leaning into each other like teenagers on a first date, completely absorbed in their conversation. Madison was wearing this black dress I'd never seen before, something sleek and expensive-looking that showed off her figure in a way that was definitely not appropriate for a client dinner. Derek looked... God, he looked happy. Happier than I'd seen him in years. His whole face was lit up as he listened to whatever Madison was saying, and when she laughed at something he said, he got this boyish grin that I remembered from our early dating days. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was seeing. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe they'd run into each other by coincidence. Maybe Madison was just being supportive, helping Derek work through our divorce like a good friend would. But then Derek reached across the table and tucked a strand of Madison's hair behind her ear, and she smiled at him in a way that was definitely not friendly. It was intimate. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you're falling for them, or maybe when you already have. I sat there for, I don't know how long, just watching them, watching my best friend flirt with my husband, watching Derek be the charming, attentive man I'd fallen in love with, except now he was being that way with someone else, someone who was supposed to be my friend. They were so absorbed in each other that they never looked around the restaurant, never noticed me sitting there, watching my world collapse over a glass of wine I could no longer taste. Finally, I threw some money on the table and walked out into the cold Denver night, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my car keys. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all, that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I already knew the truth. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Bailey curled up next to me, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. My mind was racing through every interaction I'd had with Madison over the past few months, looking for clues I'd missed. The canceled plans, the distracted conversations, the way she'd seemed less interested in the details of my divorce proceedings, how she'd stopped asking about Derek altogether, when before she'd always been ready with advice about dealing with his latest difficult behavior. And Derek, his mysterious good mood, his newfound confidence during our settlement negotiations, the way he'd been almost eager to move out of our house. It all made sick, horrible sense now. By 6 a.m., I was drinking coffee and formulating a plan. I needed proof. Seeing them together once could theoretically be explained away, but I knew in my gut this wasn't a one-time thing. This had been going on for a while, maybe months. I needed to know exactly how long, and I needed evidence that couldn't be disputed. I called in sick to work, something I never did, and spent the morning doing what any rational person would do in my situation. I turned into a detective. First, I went through Derek's credit card statements. We still had joint accounts that wouldn't be split until the divorce was finalized, so I had access to everything. I logged into our online banking and started scrolling through months of transactions, looking for patterns. There it was, dinner at Mercantile Dining and Provision in Union Station on a Tuesday night in September, the same night Derek had told me he was working late on a project deadline. An expensive bottle of wine at Narrative Wine and Coffee, charged on a Saturday afternoon when he'd said he was apartment hunting. Multiple charges at restaurants I knew Madison had mentioned loving, Linger, Root Down, Ophelia's Electric Soapbox. But the smoking gun came when I found charges for a weekend getaway to Aspen in early October. 2 nights at the Little Nell, one of the most exclusive hotels in Colorado. Derek had told me that weekend that he was going fishing with his college buddy Marcus in Gunnison. I called Marcus. "Hey, Carole, how are you holding up?" Marcus sounded genuinely concerned, which made what I was about to ask even more awkward. "I'm hanging in there. Listen, I have a weird question. That fishing trip you and Derek took to Gunnison a few weeks ago, did you guys have fun?" There was silence on the other end. Then, "Fishing trip? Carole, I haven't been fishing with Derek in over a year. Last time I talked to him was at your 4th of July barbecue." My stomach dropped. "Oh, maybe I'm confused about the dates. Is everything okay? You sound upset." I made some excuse about mixing up his stories and got off the phone quickly. So Derek had lied about the fishing trip, spent a romantic weekend in Aspen with my best friend, and charged it all to our joint credit card. The audacity was breathtaking. Next, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to Madison's apartment complex in Washington Park. Her unit faced the parking lot, and Derek's silver Tesla was parked right there in visitor parking. It was 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon. Madison had told me earlier that week that she had a busy day showing properties to clients. I sat in my car across the street for an hour. Derek's car didn't move. Neither of them came or went. I didn't need to see them together again to know what was happening inside that apartment. The betrayal hit me in waves. Not just Derek's. I'd already accepted that our marriage was over, that he was capable of dishonesty and selfishness. But Madison? We'd shared everything for 15 years. She'd been the sister I'd never had, the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. She'd held me while I cried about my failing marriage. She'd helped me interview lawyers. She'd listened to me worry about my future, about starting over, about whether I'd ever find love again. And the entire time, she was planning her own future with the man who was breaking my heart. The next phase of my investigation was the hardest part emotionally, but I knew I had to do it. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal, and more importantly, I needed to figure out exactly when it had started. Was this something that began after Derek and I separated, or had they been lying to me for months before that? I started paying attention to their social media activity in a way that probably wasn't healthy, but desperate times and all that. Madison's Instagram was mostly professional. Glamorous shots of the luxury homes she was selling, photos from real estate events, the occasional brunch with her sister Emma. But when I really looked closely, I started noticing things. There was a photo from Labor Day weekend of Madison at a Broncos tailgate party. She was wearing Derek's lucky jersey, the orange Peyton Manning one I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. The caption just said, "Go Broncos!" But I recognized that jersey immediately. Derek never let anyone else wear it. Ever. Then there was a post from mid-September, a picture of Madison's perfectly manicured hand holding a craft cocktail at some trendy rooftop bar downtown. In the background, barely visible, was Derek's distinctive watch, the vintage Rolex his grandfather had left him. I'd stared at that watch across dinner tables for 8 years. I knew every scratch on it. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered something Madison had mentioned in passing during one of our coffee dates in early October. She'd said she was thinking about getting a dog, maybe a rescue from the Denver Dumb Friends League. At the time, I thought it was sweet. She'd always loved Bailey and seemed genuinely interested in pet ownership. Now I realized she wasn't planning to get a dog. She was planning to help take care of mine. I decided to set a trap. It felt manipulative and awful, but I was beyond caring about playing fair at this point. They certainly hadn't been fair to me. I called Madison on a Friday evening and told her I was having a crisis. Derek was being impossible about Bailey's custody arrangement, I said, and I was worried I might lose him in the divorce settlement. I needed to talk to someone who understood how much Bailey meant to me. "Oh, honey," Madison said, her voice full of what sounded like genuine sympathy. "That's terrible. Derek's being such an ass about everything, isn't he?" The irony of her calling my husband an ass while she was sleeping with him wasn't lost on me. "Could we grab coffee tomorrow morning?" I asked. "I really need a friend right now." She agreed immediately, suggesting we meet at our usual spot on South Broadway at 10 a.m. But here's what I didn't tell her. I had already made plans to take Bailey to the dog park at Washington Park at 9:30. The same Washington Park where Madison lived. The same park where I'd noticed Derek's car in her parking lot multiple times over the past week. Saturday morning, I drove to Washington Park with Bailey, parked where I could see both the dog park and Madison's apartment complex, and waited. Sure enough, at 9:15, Derek's Tesla pulled out of the visitor parking and headed toward downtown. He was probably going to his gym or maybe grabbing groceries, but the timing was perfect. At exactly 10 a.m., I called Madison from the dog park. "Hey," I said, putting on my most distraught voice. "I'm so sorry, but I'm running about 20 minutes late. Bailey got loose in the park and it took me forever to catch him. Can we push back to 10:30? "Of course," Madison said quickly. "No problem at all. Take your time." Here's the thing. I was watching her apartment building while we talked. Derek's car pulled back into visitor parking at 10:07. Madison was supposedly getting ready to meet me for coffee to discuss my marital problems, but my husband was walking back into her apartment building with what looked like takeout bags from Snooze, our favorite brunch spot. They were having the weekend morning routine that should have been mine. I didn't go to coffee that day. Instead, I called Madison back 15 minutes later, claiming Bailey had eaten something at the park, and I needed to take him to the emergency vet. She was appropriately sympathetic and concerned, telling me to keep her posted and that we'd reschedule soon. But I was done rescheduling. I was done being lied to, done being the fool in this triangle I hadn't even known existed. It was time for action. That weekend, I put together what I started calling my evidence file. Screenshots of Derek's credit card statements showing dinners and trips that coincided with his lies to me. Photos I'd taken of his car at Madison's apartment. A detailed timeline of all the times Madison had canceled on me, cross-referenced with Derek's whereabouts, even that Instagram photo of her wearing his jersey, which I'd screenshotted before she eventually deleted it. But I wanted more than just evidence. I wanted them to face consequences for what they'd done. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. See, Madison's real estate career was built on her reputation in Denver's tight-knit luxury market. She worked for Pinnacle Properties, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Their whole brand was built on trust, discretion, and family values. They handled multi-million-dollar transactions for Denver's elite, old money families, tech executives, professional athletes. These weren't the kind of clients who appreciated scandal or drama. More importantly, Madison had recently been selected as one of 5 agents competing for a promotion to senior partner. It was a huge opportunity that she'd been working toward for 3 years. The decision was going to be made in December, just a few weeks away. She'd mentioned it constantly during our friendship, talking about how it would set up her entire future. Derek's situation was a bit different, but equally vulnerable. He worked for a mid-size software company called TechFlow Solutions that had a pretty strict morality clause in their employee handbook. More importantly, he was in the middle of being considered for a team lead position that would come with a significant salary increase, money he'd need to pay me alimony and maintain his current lifestyle. But here's what made my plan really delicious. Both Derek and Madison had no idea that I knew about their relationship. They thought they were being so careful, so clever. They had no idea I'd been documenting everything for weeks. I decided to wait until the perfect moment. Madison's final interview for the partnership, which she'd mentioned was scheduled for December 15th. She was so excited about it, so confident. She'd even asked me to keep my fingers crossed for her, which took some serious audacity considering she was sleeping with my husband at the time. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would compile everything into a comprehensive presentation, timeline, photos, receipts, everything, and send it simultaneously to Madison's boss at Pinnacle Properties and Derek's HR department at TechFlow Solutions. But I wouldn't do it anonymously. No, I wanted them to know exactly who had exposed them. In the meantime, I played the part of the oblivious friend and soon-to-be ex-wife. I continued having coffee with Madison, listening to her excited chatter about her career prospects and her dating life, which she claimed was non-existent. I signed divorce papers and attended mediation sessions with Derek, watching him lie about his finances while knowing exactly what he'd been spending money on. The hardest part wasn't the waiting, though. It was the gaslighting. Both of them, in their own ways, made me feel like I was being paranoid or needy. Madison would say things like, "You seem so stressed lately. Maybe you should talk to someone professional," while Derek accused me of being emotionally unstable during our settlement negotiations. But I held on to my evidence like a lifeline, knowing that soon enough, the truth would come out. And when it did, I wanted to make sure the whole world could see exactly who Derek Matthews and Madison Pierce really were. December 15th couldn't come fast enough. December 15th arrived with one of those perfect Colorado winter mornings, crisp, clear, with fresh snow on the mountains visible from downtown Denver. Madison had texted me the night before, practically bouncing with excitement about her partnership interview. She was meeting with the senior partners at Pinnacle Properties at 10 a.m. I knew Derek had his team lead interview scheduled for 2 p.m. the same day. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd planned it myself. I got to my office early that morning, my carefully compiled evidence file saved on my laptop and ready to send. I'd organized everything into a clear, professional presentation that looked like something you might see in a boardroom. Timeline of the affair, documented lies, photographic evidence, financial records, everything laid out in chronological order with dates and times. At exactly 9:45 a.m., I sent the email to Madison's boss with the subject line, "Regarding Madison Pierce's professional conduct." I attached the presentation and included a brief note explaining that as someone going through divorce proceedings, I felt obligated to share information about my attorney's discovery process that might be relevant to their partnership decision. At 1:45 p.m., I sent an identical package to Derek's HR department, with an additional note about how his adultery might violate the company's morality clause and affect his ability to handle the responsibilities of leadership. Then I waited. Madison called me at 11:30 a.m., about an hour and a half after her interview would have ended. "Carole," she said, and her voice was completely different. Gone was the bubbly, confident tone I'd grown used to. She sounded hollow, defeated. "We need to talk." "Sure," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What's up?" "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? It's important." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, neutral territory that wasn't one of our usual spots. When I walked in, Madison was already there, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee like she needed it for warmth. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying, and she kept glancing around the coffee shop like she expected someone to be watching her. "I know that you know," she said as soon as I sat down. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her, waiting. The interview. They asked me about Derek, about my relationship with him. They had photos, Carole. They had receipts. They knew everything. Her voice cracked. They said I'd violated their ethics policy and that they couldn't consider me for partnership. Still, I said nothing. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough," I finally said. Madison started crying then, real tears that smudged her mascara and made her nose red. "I never meant for it to happen this way. It started out as support, you know? He was going through such a hard time with the divorce, and he needed someone to talk to and—" "Stop," I said. "Just stop." She looked up at me, startled by the firmness in my voice. "Don't you dare try to make this about Derek needing support. Don't you dare try to make this about anything other than what it is. You and my husband lying to me for months while I trusted you both completely." "Carole, please." "When did it start?" I asked. "And don't lie to me anymore. I have credit card records, I have photos, I have a timeline. When did it start?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. Finally, she said, "August." August. That was 2 months before Derek and I had even separated. 3 months before I'd filed for divorce. They'd been having an affair while I was still sleeping in the same bed as my husband, while I was still trying to save my marriage through counseling sessions that Derek kept missing because of work emergencies. "Get out," I said. "What?" "Get out of this coffee shop. Get out of my life. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't contact me ever again." Madison opened her mouth to say something else, but I was already standing up, already walking away. Derek's reckoning came later that afternoon, and it was somehow even more satisfying than Madison's. He called me at 4 p.m., absolutely furious. "What the hell did you do, Carole?" "I told the truth," I said simply. "Something you and Madison seem to have forgotten how to do. You destroyed my career. Do you understand that? They withdrew the promotion. They're putting me on probation. They might even fire me." I was sitting in my office, looking out at the downtown Denver skyline, feeling calmer than I had in months. "That's interesting. When exactly did you start sleeping with my best friend Derek? Because I'd really love to know." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "You've been lying to me for months," I continued. "You've been lying to our divorce mediator, lying to our lawyers, lying to everyone. You charged romantic dinners and weekend getaways to our joint credit card while telling me you couldn't afford fair alimony. You gaslit me into thinking I was paranoid and unstable when I started suspecting something was wrong. So forgive me if I don't have a lot of sympathy for your career troubles." "This is vindictive and petty," Derek said. "Even for you." "No," I said. "Vindictive and petty would have been posting everything on social media for all our mutual friends to see. Vindictive and petty would have been sending the photos to your mother, who already thinks you could do better than Madison. This was just consequences." That evening, I went home to Bailey and ordered Thai food from my favorite place on South Broadway. I opened a bottle of wine, good wine, the expensive stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat on my couch with my dog, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from both Derek and Madison. Derek alternated between rage and attempted manipulation, telling me I was crazy, that I'd regret this, that I was just making the divorce more complicated for myself. Madison's messages were more pleading, long paragraphs about friendship and forgiveness, about how she knew she'd made mistakes, but couldn't I understand that love was complicated. I deleted them all without reading most of them. But the real validation came over the next few days, when the news of their affair spread through our social circle. It turned out that several of our mutual friends had suspected something was going on, but hadn't wanted to get involved or hadn't been sure. Others were completely shocked and reached out to offer support and apologize for not seeing what was happening. Derek's sister Emma called me. We'd always gotten along well, and she'd never particularly liked Madison. "I just want you to know that the whole family thinks Derek's an idiot," she said. "And Madison? Well, we always thought there was something a little off about her. Too interested in other people's business, you know?" The divorce proceedings moved much more smoothly after that. Derek's lawyer advised him to settle quickly and quietly, probably hoping to avoid any more public scrutiny of his client's behavior. Derek agreed to terms that were significantly more favorable to me than what he'd been offering before, including full custody of Bailey, a larger share of our assets, and reasonable alimony payments. Madison, meanwhile, was forced to find a new job. Word had spread through Denver's real estate community about why she'd been passed over for partnership at Pinnacle Properties. She eventually found a position with a smaller, less prestigious firm, but her dreams of becoming a major player in luxury real estate were effectively over. Some people might say I went too far, that I was cruel, that I should have confronted them privately first, that I should have tried to work things out, or at least given them a chance to explain. But here's the thing. They had months to explain. They had months to be honest with me. Instead, they chose to lie, to deceive, to make me feel crazy for trusting my instincts. They chose to build their happiness on the foundation of my pain. So I chose to let them face the natural consequences of their choices. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my newly redecorated living room in Highlands Ranch. The house is officially mine now, with Bailey sprawled across my feet and a cup of coffee getting cold on the table beside me. I'm different now than I was when this story started, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. I'm harder now, more cynical about friendship and love and trust. But I'm also stronger. I learned that I could survive betrayal, that I could stand up for myself, that I could demand better treatment from the people in my life. Derek and Madison are still together, as far as I know. I heard through mutual friends that they moved to Colorado Springs, probably hoping for a fresh start away from the wreckage of their reputations in Denver. Derek found a new job. Madison joined another real estate firm. Whether they're happy or not isn't really my concern anymore. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing them the way I did, if I think I should have handled it differently, been more forgiving, taken the high road. The answer is complicated. I'm not proud of the person I became during those dark months, the detective work and the calculated revenge, but I'm also not sorry for refusing to be a victim, for demanding honesty, for making sure there were real consequences for their actions. I learned that sometimes the high road is overrated. Sometimes people need to face the natural results of their choices, and sometimes, just sometimes, the truth really can set you free. Bailey just looked up at me with those wise golden retriever eyes, and I swear he nodded in agreement. What do you think? Did I go too far, or did Derek and Madison get what they deserved? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole messy situation. Thanks for listening to my story.